Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Overview and Scrutiny. Nice to see so many people here tonight. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to welcome Councillor Pitt, who's joined the committee very recently, so welcome, and I'm sure you'll make great contributions to the meeting. Without further ado, we'll start. Apologies.
So we have apologies this evening from Councillor Martin, Councillor Gardner and Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Minutes of last meeting.
You have in your packs the minutes of the last meeting on the 5th of February. Is everybody happy that the Chair signs them, or are there any comments or amends? Is that okay?
Thank you, Becky. Item 2, members' interests.
Thank you, Chair. So a member of St Neots Town Council, so that comes up in the Market Towns programme. But I don't think it constitutes a conflict, but obviously take advice on that as necessary.
I better do the same, Chair, and I presume Councillor Terry's going to do that.
Well, in that same interest, I may as well declare an interest as well. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Ramsey Town Council, and also very tenuous bit on the DMC when it comes down to the planning report. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure how relevant it still is, Chair, but I was on the Priory Centre Building Development Group.
It's always easier just to mention it rather than not. Thank you, Councillor Jennings. And did you get mine? And Councillor Wells, thank you. Item 3, Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme.
So you have in your packs the work programme with the agenda plan for the coming months and the notice of key decisions. So are there any comments or questions on those that we've got coming through? Oh, sorry.
So thank you. Pardon my enthusiasm. Please, I'll might be getting ahead of myself here, but I thought I'd throw it in. So, community infrastructure levy funding coming up in April. I'd be really keen to hear, not just in terms of the applications that have been received and the decisions that are proposed, but also just a reflection. I know we've had some interim new guidance on the SIL procedures and rules, I suppose is probably the right word. I'd be really interested to hear from officers and the portfolio holder how that's been in practice, in terms of the quality of applications and decision-making process. So if we could request that that's covered in the report, that would be really useful.
Is that something we could put on, Becky?
Yes, I can certainly speak to them and see if that's going to be covered or not, and then I can feed back if that's not going to be the case. I think Councillor Jennings had questions.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Martin has asked me to raise that after the last council meeting where it was discussed about having the green garden waste on the scrutiny work programme, that was also added.
Thank you. I was going to raise that issue myself anyway. So I think it's certainly an interest that we have. We need to just bottom out exactly the terms of reference that we're actually going to do on that. So perhaps we'll look at the terms of reference and then just bring that back. But in theory, I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Are there any other?
Sorry. Sure. Thank you, Chair. May I just clarify, just for members' expectations, are you proposing, Chair, that a draft terms of reference for that scrutiny item comes back to the next meeting and then it's then scheduled in? Because otherwise I'm not sure what you're agreeing to when. So just for clarity.
I agree actually on that, because obviously the issue of the green bin is very wide ranging. So I think we need to narrow down more specifically what we want to actually look at. And to that, unless Councillor Martin detailed that. So I think that does need a bit more work. So perhaps we can define that and make sure we actually bring that back to the next scrutiny, unless, of course, he submits something in the meantime.
In that case, just for clarity, I think, Becky, if we take an action that will invite Andy Rogan to the next scrutiny meeting, so that you've got the officer in the room to hear the scoping of what committee is seeking to achieve from that scrutiny, and he'll be able to give you an indication then of the timescales for him to prepare that, having got the scoping, so you can properly accommodate that within your work programme. Thank you.
It's an excellent idea. Thank you, Michelle. Are there any other comments? Councillor Pickering.
Yeah, just on the pending agenda items, I noticed that the Market Town summer update for the June meeting has a recommendation for move to member briefing space. I'm not opposed to that, but I do think that when the St Neots project is finished, that we ought to have a proper lessons learned deep dive. So I think Market Town shouldn't drop off the scrutiny programme altogether.
My proposal was for the updates to move to the member briefing space, and then when we know that the project's finished, to do the sort of come back with the lessons learned, etc., to this panel as a separate item, rather than just the general updates. Move the general updates to the meeting, to the member briefings, which was obviously the information that was fed back from the workshops that you've had. But obviously, if you would like to change that, absolutely we can do.
No, I'm really happy for that, for that to stay, but just I don't know if obviously the Market Towns isn't anywhere else on the sort of work programme at the moment, so if we could just...
We're just waiting for dates as to when that's going to be finalised, so that we can plan it in properly rather than move around.
Thank you.
That's a good idea, thank you. Are there any other... Councillor Pitt.
Thanks again. I was going to mention the same point that Councillor Pickering did, but I think because Priory Centre is likely to be sometime... The completion of that project will be quite a while after the others. I think maybe not to wait till everything's finished before we do that wash-up meeting, because it could be, I won't speculate right now, a little while longer than many of the other projects, so it might be worth fitting it in sooner rather than later.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Are you suggesting then to have an additional meeting just for the Priory Centre?
I suppose it would make sense if once the majority of the projects sitting inside the Market Towns programme have completed, to do a wash-up meeting, recognising that not all of them may have been completed by that date, because to wait for all of them would delay that conversation. While it's still fresh, it would be great to have that conversation, and then perhaps a follow-up one a year later to pick up the bits that hadn't quite gone over the line by that point.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Any other comments on that? Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that, Councillor Pitt. Are there any other comments on the work programme? Thank you. I think we'll move to item 4, which is the corporate performance report.
Thank you, Chair. So, first of all, normally we would be talking about the Q3 performance at the February meeting, but we were bumped because of the budget discussions. So it's a bit odd to be discussing what was happening in December in the middle of March. We're near the end of the year, but we'll try our best. And I'm sure lots of the things we're talking about will have changed since then. And hopefully Mr. Sloper will help me out. I'd also like to thank Mr. Sloper for his contribution in keeping these reports going. We had Dan Buckridge and Emma left us, who did a wonderful job of preparing these reports, and with your help in taking them through several iterations. They left us a few months ago, and since then Neil has been doing this valiantly, I think, and it's an incredible amount of work. Luckily, we've recruited, and I've met with all of them now, Lucy, Steph and Ben, who are going to be taking this over in the future. Very impressed by my interactions with them so far, especially their commitment. They want to get all the reporting done with 2 button clicks per measure, which I think is a very admirable ambition, especially considering all the work's gone in the past. So they seem like excellent people. I think we can look forward to seeing even better reporting. And for those who are stats nerds, they also seem to be very data focused too. So we might be able to get some more standard deviations into the report. I think in the past you've asked us to try and do this by exception reporting, so I could focus on lots of the really good things in here. So there's lots of overperformance, there's lots of metrics which have moved from amber to green. not least our community health and well-being strategy, which is now there. But I'm going to focus on the reds tonight. So for me, I think the point of this report is that when we see reds, we should be able to see them as warning lights and come together and discuss how we're going to have solutions to them. So for me personally, as a portfolio holder, my biggest concern, as I say this at every meeting, I've been saying this for over a year, is the current reds and predicted ambers for the disability facilities grants measures. I find that very disappointing. We raised this a year ago, and this committee kindly offered to put together a task and finish group, but that group has only met once, I think, in that time, and we haven't made enough progress. So, for me, that's a significant failing. That's a measure which affects people. And if you're going to sit in the home of anybody who's got disability and they can't stay in the home because, they can't get the home adapted quick enough, that's really tragic. So I think we all need to do better in solving that problem, working with places for people, and just looking how we can improve all those measures. So I've raised this at every single meeting with officers, and I appreciate your support in getting that task and finish group up and working and solving that problem. I think you'll also have questions, rightly so. Councillor Jennings raised it, but the green bins program, the impacts of that, we've got some metrics here which show some expected consequences of that introduction, some less expected consequences. So we have a red for the number of bins collected. We always have exceptional performance. We're still above average, but I think that service has understandably struggled with the logistical changes in place that they've had to put in place to deal with that. So the performance is excellent, but we set ourselves targets, and at the moment we're failing to meet them. And I think also you'll want to talk about community civil parking enforcement, which is now red as well. That's largely outside of our control. I think we've done all of the things that we can do, but we're waiting for parliamentary time. But I think, everybody in Huntingdonshire who's affected by antisocial and illegal parking will be frustrated that that's taking a bit longer than expected. Happy to answer any questions on any of those matters. Neil, do you want to say anything at all? Or?
Thank you for the update. If I may just clarify the issue of the task and finish group. That was, although it was discussed at this committee, it was in fact to go to our colleagues on the other committee. But I see no reason why that actually couldn't have members from both. Beckett.
Just to confirm with the DFG working group, that has they were waiting for some consultation work, and that has now been completed. And the group did actually meet again last week, so that's now underway. But obviously we can update. We'll be updating the other panel on that. But I can update you separately if you'd like, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. You make an excellent point, because it was this committee who suggested forming it, and this committee I report back to, and I don't have the opportunity to report to the other committee, and so it's difficult to raise. So I've raised it with the chair of the other committee, and she agrees with me, and I think that's in hand now. But a year is too long before we make those changes, and so I would appreciate your support, because it's a difficult problem to solve.
Absolutely, I totally agree with about DFGs, because I know how important they are to get people out of hospitals and all the rest of it, and how the delays that's impacting. But thank you very much for that. I'll open the floor to members. Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Vis-a-vis the DFG, very happy to join that. I know there's an appeal in there for members to join it, and as someone who is disabled and who has been around this cycle quite a lot myself, I'm very happy to get involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other Councillor Jennings?
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad you talked about the DFG on PI 4 and 5, and I just had a couple of questions about those performance indicators. Really, do you know? We talk about the absolute level of grants that are given. Do we know how many are actually applied for? To sort of give us an idea of what that backlog is. And in the narrative, it talked about this being escalated. And I just wondered what that internal escalation actually means, and in reality, what pressure are we able to put on places for people to try and get this done more quickly? And I appreciate that some of this may overlap with what the task and finish group are talking.
So I don't have the information you requested to hand, but it's a good point, isn't it? It's additional context, and without that context, some of the figures are not meaningful. So I think we'll commit to get you that information. So perhaps next time we can discuss it, and it would be useful for the task and finish group. With regard to it's difficult for me to say, but with regard to the pressure that we can apply to places for people, I've been in this portfolio for nearly 3 years, and it must have been 2 years ago when I sat here saying that we've got a solution. I think we had high level officer intervention, things improved for a little while, but the problem is they're a commercial organisation, and I think rather uniquely, we're a council that doesn't have our own housing stock as well. So I think this is biting us back for decisions we were taking a long time ago to dispose of our housing stock. I think we have more people homed with places for people than any other council, so that should give us extra leverage. But it's really in the officer space, I think. I'd like to think I could. Without wanting to be negative about a partner, that most interactions I have with residents, and maybe they're not always fair, are negative about places for people, and I think they need to do a better job. People are suffering because of this, and so, whatever. Well, I'm personally prepared to call them out. I think we've offered them a fair chance to fix things, and so hopefully the task and finish group will resolve this. But I think we should be very public that if our residents are suffering because of the actions of an external commercial organisation, then we need to be honest about that. So we don't have much choice, do we? That's a problem.
Are there any other Councillor Pitt?
Thank you, Chair. Just a small point on page 49 of the report. It mentions successful delivery of the upgrades to the path and cycle ways in Riverside Park in St Neots. Just want to share with the committee and anyone else I'll guess here that actually it was Regatta Meadow that was upgraded and the funding didn't cover Riverside Park. So there's still a set of paths in Riverside Park that I think have been removed rather than upgraded, much to the frustration of some wheelchair users that, were unpleasantly surprised by that. So I hope that's something that's still on HCC's to-do list to resolve those paths. So it's just a specific point. Again, sort of new to this committee, so I'll take advice on how usefully to kind of comment on this report. But reading through it with a sort of fresh pair of eyes, I suppose, there's quite a lot of ambers under the improving housing section. And then page 48, updating the procurement policy. That feels like a really significant piece of work that's going to have a long reach, but actually quite a long period to kind of get it up and running. So I'm really keen that kind of moves forward, with haste. I see that one's red. So those are the two that I kind of wanted to highlight from this chair today, and welcome any comments.
Neil, would you like to respond to the first question?
Yes, certainly. So on the first one, we have full planning permission, obviously, for all the works at St Neots Riverside. There wasn't enough funding from the original SIL to extend to all of the works, so therefore it still is a project. It's sourcing that funding, and at the moment that service is progressing with an A4 to 8 bid to seek that funding, and if that is unsuccessful, then they'll continue to seek for funding to address that issue. But the planning is there. The plan is there to do it, so we're committed to do it and have the ability to do the work subject to the funding. So it is very much still on the agenda. In terms of the housing, it's important to say that we're an influencer in terms of some of that, and the housing delivery of affordable housing is linked to the delivery of housing, and that's slowed down this year, whereas last year it was accelerated. And that's a reflection on the market in terms of that deliverable. So we're keeping track of that, and also there was a specific action to pick up with the developers to support that, and there were meetings that were held in January. So obviously that follows on into the Q4 report rather than the Q3. So in terms of the corporate plan action, things have been happening in Q4 which would address that issue. And then finally, in terms of procurement, since that Q3 position, the director has employed a procurement team. They're in and they've scoped a procurement excellence project. that project has been started and there's resource being put in to support that procurement team with process mapping and things as well to improve the process within the council. So that work has started after there was a little bit of a pause, just purely because we had a change of staff in the procurement team. So just to reassure you, the work is underway and happening, and you'll see some of that in the quarter 4 report.
Thank you, Neil, for answering all those questions. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just like to know a bit more about the fly tips. I know you might not be able to answer it straight tonight, but just interested to know. Yeah, sadly we're seeing it. We're all seeing it, aren't we? But I think it's a really good opportunity to highlight the work that the guys are doing, because I know that when I've personally reported stuff, it's gone very quickly, that needs commending. But is it related to, sadly, the green bins, or and then on the back of that, if it's not, how are we looking on sort of taking up action and on any evidence that we found from the fly tip rubbish?
So I had a long conversation with Councillor Taylor about this, who in turn had a long conversation with Andy Rogan. I do think that the enforcement team, who are in my portfolio, do an excellent job in detecting, I think, and also the ops team in clearing up. There's sometimes a conflict because the ops team, I think, clear up the incidents of fly tipping before we can investigate them. So there's some tension between those teams. So actually having them around for longer so we can root through the evidence and prosecute people is an issue. So I think they do a great job. I think we do a good job of publicising it when we make prosecutions. Do I think it's related to the green bin scheme? I think an increase in fly tipping in December is unlikely to be related to garden waste. This is a new measure. It's kind of one of those suck it and see measures. We're kind of monitoring for the first year. We've set a target which might have been ambitious, might not have been, but we'll see after the first year. I think it's really important. I think we do a great job of dealing with fly tipping, but every single incident, if you see it, it's very visible, isn't it? I mean, when I went out with the community enforcement team, we spent most of the time touring the north part of the county and visited Ramsey as well. So they do it all over the place is the point, and I think they do a great job. Perhaps they do too great a job sometimes, but it's something we take very seriously.
Thank you for that, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. I was going to ask the same question over fly tipping, because I suspected that there might be a linkage. On page 51, we've got the number of missed bins, and I'd be grateful if Neil, do you know if that includes? There were hundreds that were missed a few months ago, but it was not due to an HCC fault. It was to do with the county council closing off a load of roads. In St Neots, so whole estates were being missed, but they were picked up later. Now, I just wondered if that was why we'd slipped in the red there. Maybe not. Maybe you don't. I've got one other question as well.
I can't answer for the service, but we can find out that information. But they would record, because they're very rigorous with their measures, that if they weren't able to collect the bin, it's declared as a missed bin, but we can check that figures with Andy just to see if that made an impact.
I just thought we might be saying we're red, and we probably shouldn't have been in there. Now, my other question is following up on the paths in the parks. So the paths in Riverside, in Regatta Meadow that have been done, have those cost the whole of the 435,000 that was allocated to? 445 includes the 10,000 for the Market Square. Sorry, Chair. 435,000, I believe, was allocated for that. Is that what the costs of the entire amount of money that's been taken by Regatta Meadow, or is it less than that and we haven't got quite enough to do the other, or where do we stand exactly on that?
So in terms of the specifics, I don't have the figures to hand, but what I can say is all the concept design the planning process, all of that was taken out of that funding because obviously that's a proportion of the cost. And then the remainder, we looked at the works that we could do. And I think one of the things that you're looking at there is the change in costs that we're facing for some of our materials. Only this week I was having a conversation about a project where they're saying realistically over a year they're seeing a 25% increase in cost because of Ukraine at the moment in terms of some of those raw materials. So we did experience cost increase during COVID, so the money didn't go as far, but the scope of the works was bigger. And the funding that was given back to us from the county council, so it wasn't funding asked for the scope of works that we intended to do. We just maximised the use of the money on the scheme that we wanted to do.
Chair, if I can say, I'm like it noted that I'm a little bit concerned about this because some of those paths were put in 1974, and if we want to encourage green means of transport, it's very dangerous trying to ride on those, especially in the dark. And I really would like to sort of find out some more information on when we're likely to get those paths done.
Neil, will you take that away?
Absolutely, yes. And as I said, there is a live funding bid to the A428 at the moment for that to complete those works. So funding's being worked on at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. On page 72, under forward, we've got an action to work with the CPCA and partners to complete a review of the future demand for further education in the St Hearts area. And that's amber with a negative direction of travel. I just wondered if you could say a bit more about why that's amber and what we're doing to get it back to be positive.
So this is actually a piece of work which it falls not into the do of the council, but actually in the influence and enable. So it is a combined authority project that we're influencing and working with them on because it falls under their remit of skills and further education. So as a result of that, the piece of work has been done, the study has been completed, I know that much, and that's in the commentary, and feedback has been given from ourselves, and we're just waiting for the next step from the combined authority on that. Yes, it's not a project that we're leading on or that we're directly doing, but we are involved with and influencing, yes.
And just wondering then, why is that something that we're measuring in this report if it's not something that we can really take any action on?
Chair, Councillor Wakeford, if he's invited to respond, might have additional context. He has volunteered, I think.
Councillor Wakeford, if you have some information that could benefit this, I'd be happy to see you.
Thank you. So this is in the papers and in our sort of strategic thinking because there is a significant strategic importance to us from all sorts of perspectives, not least in terms of the economic development of the St Neots area, but also all of what that means for young people and life opportunities and life chances, for us to be doing something about the cold spot that had been identified by the combined authority in FE provision in the area. It is CPCA led, we're plugged into it. Further to update Neil's given, so we have identified, we through the combined authority have identified through expressions of interest some education providers pitching for proposals to progress. Those have moved to full tendering of bids from identified providers. So it is moving on, but it's not where we wanted it to be by now. The Combined Authority have held their hands up previously and acknowledged it hadn't moved at the pace they wanted. So it is motoring now. It's amber because it's still outstanding. And as I say, we'd hope there'd be more movement now. So the outcome of this is for more educational opportunities at FE level available to young people in and around St Neots and to an extent beyond, but the core focus of this has been on St Neots and the other cold spot in East Cambs. So I hope that's somewhat helpful. It is moving on. It's not in our hands directly, but it's relevant to us.
I actually tend to agree with Councillor Pickering. If we're actually only influencing, it's perhaps a little unfair to rag rate it at this point.
So the way in which the corporate plan is written, there are a number of actions where we do things ourselves. There's a number of things that we influence and a number of things that we enable. And so therefore there is a spectrum of those in the corporate plan. And so that is one of the actions where we're influencing it because, as was explained, it has an impact on the district. We're bringing forward a refresh of the corporate plan, and obviously members will have the opportunity to comment on that. And maybe there's some reflection on that particular example, maybe in terms of honing down the corporate plan revision even.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Catmer.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've raised this before. We are reporting in colour here. For those of us who are severely colourblind, it is very difficult to read. The red, amber, green in letters, very useful. I can work those out, even though I can't see the amber colour. I think it's yellow. And the red, I'm not sure what colour it is, but the charts are all wonderfully coloured and I can't work out what line is what. So I do request that we try and do that in maybe an alternative format for those of us who cannot read colours.
I agree. This has been raised before. Neil, can you...
Chair, we have the team in attendance tonight, so they've all heard that, and I'm sure we'll make improvements for the next report. Thank you.
Welcome, team. Councillor Catman.
Yeah, I read a wonderful presentation very recently about how we present information to people who are somewhat challenged in reading things. And for example, we should not ever use white backgrounds on slides, which we are doing in this whole meeting, because that is actually a bit of it can upset some people. We should be using different colours. So there's a whole thing about how we present information to people.
If I may assist, thank you, Chair. We actually have an access to information policy, which has been through our equality review in terms of font size, colours, etc., which is a corporate standard. What I will do, it's not necessarily Neil's team that is responsible for that. It's a corporate standard. So I will take that away, Councillor Catmer. But we do consider that as a council, and it is something. So as an example, font size, I can share with you, I get several members of staff email me directly to say the font size is not correct. However, it is correct for our equality standards, which in terms of trying to support everybody in the council, we have that standard. It doesn't always address individuals' needs, but we try and do that for the most accessible way and format we can. But I will take that away and raise that with the relevant team.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, so PI 47, deliver the phase 1 rural pilot? No, that'd be exciting. Pilot HEC electric vehicle charging strategy actions for implementation in Q4. So if you have any information, I'm very enthusiastically interested to hear it, or we'll wait for it to come, down the line. But that sounds really great, and I'm delighted to see it's going forwards.
Have you got an update, Neil?
We can provide one, a written update, in terms of where it's at, because the project concludes at the end of this year, so it's work in progress now.
Thank you, Neil. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. Would like to just go back to PI 21, which is the missed green bins indicator, and I think it's something that Neil said about the operatives being the ones who are marking those that are missed. I'd be interested just to know how we get to the absolute number of missed collections. I think my assumption was that this was based on the number of contacts from householders saying that their bins had been missed. But if it's data that's coming direct from the operatives, I'm just wondering how they're going to pick up when bins have been missed if they haven't noticed they've been missed.
So, firstly, I apologise if I've caused an element of confusion, but there is a closed loop in terms of this because they use an in-cab system. So, therefore, if a bin's not been put out or any other reason like that, they'll log it in the cab. But also, then obviously, it comes through customer services in terms of a missed bin, which is raised that side. And then obviously, there's a reconciliation because, as Councillor Chapman raised, sometimes there's a reason why the missed bins weren't collected. They need to arrange to go back, and they need to arrange to go back at a suitable time as well. So there is a closed loop, but we can get an explanation, a technical explanation of that for you. We actually have a list of how the PI is created as well, so we can share that with you in terms of the actual detail of how it's collated and the process that they go through.
And we always encourage residents whose bins are missed through no fault of their own to get in contact with the customer service team. If they do it quickly, then we can often arrange to have them collected. So, yeah. I'm sure there's lots of residents watching this meeting tonight.
I'm sure there are. Are there any other... Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the preamble on page 43, which says that this quarter has seen the continued promotion of Huntingdonshire as a destination for high-value inward investment, with promotion at events all over the country, which sounds really exciting. Just wondering if you can give any more details about the events at which Huntingdonshire has been promoted, whether there have been any tangible outcomes from those, and whether that's something that we should be measuring in some way if we're investing in promoting at events, whether we can see whether that's something that's worth doing in any way.
So how fortuitous that I'm here tonight. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of national events, we attend, so UK Reef, if we start off last year in May, that's the UK's retail and investment forum, 3 days event there. We also attend localised ones. Again, I was at a UK Reef dinner last night talking about, again, made several contacts and again, following up those today, inviting people to come and talk to us about inward investment opportunities. We held our own Pride in Place event, which was our post UK Reef event in November. And we had lots of contacts there. So again, it's putting particularly timely at the moment with the reinvigoration of the Oxcam corridor, as it is now, rather than ARC, in terms of our location. So the first thing is those are the sorts of events, and it's not just myself. A range of officers will attend Chamber of Commerce events locally where there are key investment opportunities. Just this month, on the 10th of February, we hosted here in this very room the Battery and Future Fuel Symposium, where we had speakers from around the country, from academia, business, government, talking about Huntingdonshire as a place to potentially locate the UK Battery Research and Development Centre. And again, that has prompted several follow-on conversations, not just myself, but the wider team. Pam's here as well tonight in terms of those that we capture. So that's the kind of thing we're doing. In terms of how we measure outcome, we map and track through the economic development teams, sort of their own version of a CRM system. So we could track those contacts. And that's important because for us, we want to show you the value for money. In fact, so that's the first thing. So if ever anyone asks and says, so where's your value? What are your contacts? We've got that data. Now, in fact, Rebecca Tomlin, who's our new, I say new, she's been with us several months now, Economic Development Manager is doing the member briefing in April. That's the next member brief. Yes, because we've had marches in April, and that is an economic development forum. So again, I would urge all members to go to that. Rebecca is also really keen to come to Scrutiny so that you can scrutinise that in terms of what happens. And then finally, in terms of in terms of that investment, the challenge with economic development, we've talked about Miss Bins today. Miss Bins is an instant gratification. You can resolve that the next day, or indeed, as Councillor Ferguson has said, that day if a call comes through. There is a really good quote which I only used this week, actually, didn't I? And then and again, it's really pertinent for economic development. It's around those who plant trees for the shade in which they will never sit, because it's that it takes a long time to land economic development in terms of both landing it, going through the planning process, building it, and then having people occupy it. It's not like a Miss Bin instant gratification. So some of that progress can feel quite slow, but actually it's the step by step that you're doing to create confidence, and that's where I'll end. It's around confidence. So when we, and I say that in terms of collective, we, both officers, but indeed members. So I'm going to look over to Councillor Wakeford there, who's Sarah, and so the leader, Councillor Conboy and Councillor Wakeford are also very active in that space and attend several of the events in order to show political confidence as well, because when we're seeking to attract inward investment, those investors want to see the whites of our eyes, quite frankly, because it's confidence. It's when you talk about partnership, do you mean it, or is it or not? I have a very open door policy with, quite frankly, anyone who's interested in investing millions in our place. I'm more than happy to meet with them. Not all councils operate in that space, and some developers and investors will say they cannot get meetings with their councils. It doesn't instill a confidence of that relationship. So that's a long answer to your question, but you've got the all-member briefing in April, and Rebecca is more than happy again to come to Scrutiny, again to do a presentation on the work that the team are doing, so you can scrutinise it in that format as well.
Chair, without wanting to embarrass her, I think our chief executive's unbridled enthusiasm for this topic it comes through in every interaction with her. And so if you ever get dragged into her office for telling off, you can always distract her by talking about economic development. And I was, that's what I do. I was lucky enough to be involved in one of those meetings when we went to AVL in Coventry to see their battery development, and it was really, really exciting to be going out and promoting Huntingdonshire as this destination. We do have a very privileged location on the edge of the Cambridge bubble, maybe as part of the Oxcam Arc, if you want to call it, or corridor. But we're in a very fortunate position. There's lots of people looking to invest here, and I think it's out for us to go out and find them and sell Huntingdonshire to them. And I think our Economic Development Group and our Chief Exec do a fantastic job of doing that. So thank you.
I think you've just added to that whole argument. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Terry.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the parking enforcement officers, have we asked both of our MPs for their help? And if so, what was the reply?
I think we have reached out to our MPs to ask for their support, and I think they are supporting us. It's how much influence they have over government time. Unfortunately, one of our local MPs is from the same party as the government. I think they share our concerns. I'm not sure what the feedback is, other than that they support us, and I think it's in everybody's interest to get this done as quickly as possible.
If I may, Chair, absolutely. And I think the challenge is the parliamentary time. It's really critical for us. It's just a challenge to get it on the parliamentary timetable when there is so much, particularly with the new government who has an ambitious legislative programme. It is only a small amount of time, but it is that challenge, and we do keep the pressure on in terms of reminding and pressurising our contacts there.
Yes. as a local MP, local constituent, I also get stopped regularly. I'm sure we all sympathise with that, saying, when is this going to happen? You keep threatening to do it. Councillor Chapman.
Chair, we have 3 MPs, not both of them.
I did correct myself, sorry.
And advantageously, they are all different. Different.
Yeah,
colours.
from all
So
the main.
it is a rainbow MP that we have as well. But again, all of them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on performance? Okay. That we will move on to the next item 5.
I'm so sorry, Chair. I do keep. May I, Councillor Ferguson? You referenced Dan and Emma leaving earlier on. We've referenced the new team here, but we haven't actually said who they are. So could we just say? Some of you may already have met the team, the new, but they've been with us for varying degrees of months. But we have Lucy, Steph, and Ben, who have been fantastic additions to our team here in Huntingdonshire. So again, I just thought, rather than Councillor Ferguson saying who we'd said goodbye to, we can now say properly hello to the team there. So there we go.
Welcome.
That will serve them right for turning up to council meetings.
Exactly. Getting embarrassed. Okay. Obviously, now moving on to item 5, which is Market Town Programme update.
Thank you very much, and my thanks to the Chief Executive for saving you from me being dragged up a second time on your previous item as well, in clarifying one of the economic development items. We have 2 papers to present to you now on the Market Towns programme. One of them is in public session. The second one is a so-called Part 2 paper. We're going to start with the public one, where we are now. But to allow time for discussion in Part 2, obviously in your hands through your chair with the committee. But I suppose my proposal is that some of the points which I'm imagining we'll wish to get into more detail over in Part 2, and so going to aim to get through Part 1 more swiftly than perhaps we do sometimes. So I'll seek to aid with that with as brief answers as you like, Chair. Just to run through the paper we've got for you there, there's obviously a lot going on in the Market Town programme. We continue to be happy to update in whatever ways you'd like with reference to your work plan conversation, whether that's through formal updates, whether it's through briefings, or a combination of the two. As the paper outlines, which, if I may say, wasn't as completely obvious from discussion earlier about lessons learnt reviews. Of course, we have a Market Towns programme that covers multiple market towns. New bits get picked up and completed, and therefore fall away from the programme. It's sort of ongoing. There are obviously some major projects in St Neots I'll turn to momentarily, but lessons learning lessons is a core part of our governance process internally. We're not waiting for particular projects to finish, let alone sort of everything. So more than happy to follow up with the panel or with perhaps yourself, Chair, on the panel's behalf, around identifying whether there are particular questions, particular points that you find helpful for sort of feedback on. But yeah, there's no waiting for sort of big bang lessons learning. It's important to be ongoing. So in terms of the report before you, we've got updates on the sort of the main areas of movement. So starting in Ramsey, the Great White improvements, we're finalising planning pre-application, taking advice there. And we will shortly be updating residents and the town council on the changes made in light of that input and in light of the consultation feedback we received. So the next step after that would be a formal planning application. In parallel, we've had helpful discussions with the town council and the town's representatives about mitigating parking impacts of the pedestrianisation of the existing parking area of the Great White. So that's helpful too, and we're grateful for assistance, not least from a member around the panel tonight. In Huntingdon, I think the main news is that the Cromwell Museum have now acquired the additional property that we supported them towards purchase of. So the next steps for them, albeit with support from us, are repairs to safeguard that building, and then they can proceed with heritage lottery bids to turn that into further museum space. As we've talked about before, if they can secure that, it would obviously be multiplying the value of our investment by an order of magnitude. So our stepping in has been strategic in bridging them to where they can then realistically help themselves with existing other grant pots to bid for. That is certainly helping them. It's helping the visitor economy of Huntingdon and the wider area as well, if we can get expanded Cromwell Museum space in action. The digital wayfinding screens, these continue to be a challenge to get them in the right locations as opposed to just easy locations close to existing PowerPoints and so on, but we are nearly there. They're being installed on a phased basis through the spring. The shopfront grant scheme is updated upon. This is closed to new applications. Final completions of existing grants are due by the end of this month. So there are some statistics in the paper, and you'll see a final version of that next time. And then turning to St Neots. So broken down into the main project areas, the renovation of the Priory Centre. We've resolved the lease discussed last time. Isn't explicitly signposted in the papers, but to reassure you of that. And as of a week or so ago, have confirmed the contribution from the town council to the overall works. That the magnitude of that is very welcome indeed, and we are grateful to the town council as it helps us maximise what we can get out of the scheme. It obviously helps them maximise what benefit they get in a centre that they operate as well, and specifically more of the nice to haves, if you will, beyond the basics of gutting and refurbishing the building. So now we've got that, we're locking down the scope of the works in view of what's affordable, and construction work will be commencing in the next couple of weeks. We've got a preferred contractor as previously reported, so we'll be in contract with them definitively prior to that work commencing. As soon as we're in contract, the timings of the construction programme and of its completion will be more confident, so we can do publicity with greater confidence at that point as well, in different ways, not least with respect to hoardings as well, which will be going up soon. I'm pleased to reassure members they will be substantially nicer than the hoardings that we've had to use on the Market Square, because we don't need to take into account market operation. They don't need to be movable. They can be more solid and permanent. So, as I say, announcements on that will be in the weeks ahead. The Old Falcon, we're all delighted where we've got to with this. If I may say, it was great news that we've got the planning application approved, subject to completion of a range of specifics. I don't plan to say, I think, any more about the Old Falcon at this point. It's obviously picked up in the Part 2 paper. Don't plan to say any more beyond just underlining thanks to Pam and the officer team for getting us to this milestone, as I'm sure the panel will echo. And the town centre works in St Neots, these are progressing well, on track on the timescales that we discussed last time I was before you. So still projecting completion by the end of April. I don't know about members around the table, many of whom have St Neots links, but I think it looks quite good. I think feedback from people is that there's a broad agreement of that now, that more of the finalised square is visible. We've still got about a third of it with works ongoing, still with hoardings, albeit with sightlines through them. Watch this space in terms of news around events that we're working with the town council on to showcase the new square in the coming months. And the proposed stage idea to provide the option of performance space on the market square, the feasibility report is due to be shared with the town council imminently. We're finalising that with the consultants so that the town can make a decision on whether and how to progress with a version of that. And as the paper touches on, we're ensuring that the earmarked funds remain available beyond original deadlines, which is yet to be finalised, but we are confident, if I can put it like that. And finally, the report includes updated high-level financial information in section 7, complete with some annotation, because otherwise Councillor Jennings, who is all over financial details, would spot and query the differences. So we've done some recoding there. But the amounts do tally, I promise you. But we're not getting into more detail on funding in this part of the meeting, either, for reasons members will appreciate. So I hope that's helpful as a whistle-stop summary of the paper before you. So happy to take questions now, and then when you're ready, we can move into the part 2.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford. I have to say, Pam, it was an excellent paper, good update, and I think Huntingdon, the work in Huntingdon sounds incredibly exciting. I'm opening the floor, Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. And the Priory Centre has been closed for nearly 6 months, and I'd expected that when it was closed that we'd be hitting the ground running in terms of construction, and I think we were given a time scale of it being closed for a year and ready to reopen, but it's been closed for nearly 6 months, and the only progress that we're able to report, as far as I can see, is intrusive surveys. So I was just wondering whether we're still on track to be open again in 6 months' time. I assume we're not, and if not, then what timescale are we currently working to for the Priory Centre to be back in action?
No, so as we've said before, quite clearly, we are anticipating the order of a year's work on the construction. So absolutely, we were hopeful that works could begin earlier. There are a whole range of reasons why they haven't been able to, in terms of finalising more of the planning conditions, in terms of resolving points around the lease, the financial contributions as well. We've been able to make some use of the building being closed in terms of, as you say, more intrusive survey than would be possible were it in use. But no, there is certainly a knock-on impact on the closure. That's exactly what I was referencing in terms, though, of greater detail at the point we are locked into contract and construction commences, in terms of then communicating more widely. But I think it's safe to say that's not a surprise to the town council, who are managing ably the alternative arrangements for users of the centre. In the meantime, I think it's worth underlining as well, though there was always uncertainty in there's uncertainty in all construction projects, as we know. There was always uncertainty around when we'd be able to commence construction in the refurbishment of the Priory Centre, but we did need to provide notice of closure to users. in retrospect, we could have got away with closing it later, but as we weren't confident of that, were it the other eventuality and we needed people out at shorter notice, I think that wouldn't have been optimal either. So, as I say, we are roughly speaking, we're talking about a year's worth of construction when it kicks off. For what it's worth, as I said, the town council are aware of managing that well, but we'll be able to get into more detail once we're in contract.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wakeford's answer to Councillor Pickering has answered a lot of what I was going to ask, but I'd like to just quickly channel my inner Councillor Blackwell, as I think I've spotted a typo in there. In 6.2, it says that you've been working very closely with St Neot, and I believe he died over 1100 years ago, so I'm assuming that that's a typo. But I do have one quick question, which is about the stage project and that report. And you say it'll be shared with HDC members. Are they the members around this table, and is it going to be shared at the same time as with the town council, please, Council?
Thank you. Happy to confirm I have not been in commune with any saints, deceased or otherwise, around this. Thank you, Chair. But good spot, and our apologies, Councillor Jennings. So we have no hesitation sharing information, obviously, with scrutiny panel members. In terms of sequencing, I think the general principle that we take here is that where our role is strategic as a district council, we're working with input from the most local stakeholders. That the town we're going to be sharing information with, we're in ongoing discussion with them and their officers, as you'd expect. So very happy, and obviously members of this panel, some of them are town members. I think very happy as a ward member covering the area of St Neots, Councillor Jennings, to have a conversation around making sure that you're in the loop. There's no great secrecy, but in terms of the respect that we'd owe to the town council, I think our sequencing would be going to them prior to sharing something with this panel. And as I say, I'd underline, panels are welcome to see it, but it's that different strategic role we've got here, as opposed to making more local judgment calls about what is right for the town.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Cadler.
Thank you very much, Chair. A question really, and it may just be a question of timing, is that it says in 11.3 that the risk of the Priory Centre has been reduced to an acceptable level, but elsewhere in the report it says that we are still waiting for the Environment Agency response. So that may just be a timing issue between those two items.
Yes. So I think the main budget management risk is around time and inflation and significant periods of time. And if costings cease to be valid, then adds to that. I think the point around the Environment Agency permit is absolutely right. As the report flags, we are outstanding a permit. I think we're optimistic of getting that in the third week of this month. Pam may have a date, so it is coming. We do need that to move on, but the fact that we are awaiting that permit, acquisition of which depended on various conditions as part of the planning application that we've been working through, that doesn't present significant budgetary risk to the to the programme. It shouldn't increase our costs substantially. I hope that makes sense.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. There's actually an apostrophe missing from St Neots, because it would be St Neot, and the apostrophe is missing because of the name is derived from St Neots Priory. But anyway, I'd like to congratulate how quickly the team team acted on the news that Doctor Who may be discontinued by the BBC, and arranging the new tourist attraction of the TARDIS to be located outside of the Market Cafe on the Market Square. Obviously, this was a later addition because it doesn't appear on any of the plans. And I wonder whether or not it will stay there or whether or not it will disappear into another space and time dimension at some point. You know what I'm talking about. The St. Neots.
If I may, I probably do, but for accessibility of others around the panel, let alone the masses of the public watching us, yeah.
Sorry, what's got Doctor Who? Where's the TARDIS?
There is a large black box, 2 meters square and half a meter or a meter deep, or whatever, that's appeared on the Market Square that wasn't on the original plans, which I believe houses electrical connections, and I'm hoping that there's truth that it's going to be clad in some way, or looking a little bit more in keeping with 11 or 1200-year-old ancient Market Square. We've got the. There's no need really for a response. I know the.
If I may, Councillor Chapman, I think it would be helpful for Pam to respond, because otherwise there's a comment there that anyone watching will not understand, will see that a point has been made and then there's not a point of reply effectively, and it will create a negative impression if Pam has a positive update to provide. So, Chair, if I may, I think it's appropriate for Pam to respond.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. So, firstly, the actual electrical build box, it was on the original plans, and if Councillor Chapman doesn't have a copy of those, I'm happy to share those. You're quite right that it will be clad in sort of a wood effect with a seat at the base, so that it will be covered as much as possible and integrated into the wider scheme sort of, appearance. Unfortunately, obviously, as part of the works, you would be aware that we have increased the audio-visual capability so that when the square is used for events, then that is already in the square. So people that are making use of the facility do not have to hire that equipment themselves. So that has led to an upgrade of the electrical need for the square. And some members may also be reminded that when we first started work on the square, one of the first activities that we had to do was to condemn the current electric on the square, because the boxes that are outside, the 3 boxes side by side were condemned by an electrician. So it was always part of the works. We are intending to clad it so that it is better in keeping with the surrounding area, but unfortunately it was unavoidable. It was required for the works.
Thank you for clarifying. For those of us who don't represent St. Neots, I was totally confused. Was there any further questions?
Thank you, Chair. It's not actually on the artist's impressions, but it may be.
It's on the proper drawings for the scheme, which I'm happy to share if
the
that's
artist's
of help.
impressions, which is why we get the response. The St. Neot Jewel mosaic on the Market Square, I'm a little bit concerned about how open that is, because we've had a long history of people parking on there and damaging it. And I'd hoped that there would be some sort of bollards or protection appearing there. And it would be helpful if there were. I don't know whether or not, I haven't looked to see if there's anything on the plans on that. I've got a question about the fit out costs on the Priory Centre, but I believe I can bring that up under the next item. And the other one I'm going to bring up under the next item too. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the update.
Yeah, so just may have something to add in terms of the dual and accessibility to the market square. So there was a fairly early judgment that that the square was not going to be sort of comprehensively barriered around to make it completely impossible to get any sort of vehicle onto it for reasons of openness and accessibility, appearance of the square. Obviously, there's a significant amount of physical blocking, not least from planters and so on around the square. But again, the dual and the barriers, to the extent they exist, are as per the plan. Obviously, there's a linkage with civil parking enforcement further down the line as well, as discussed in your previous agenda item. I'll happily leave it there, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I have lots and lots of questions, but you'll be pleased to know that as I know that you've got a meeting at the end of the week, I think it'd be unfair for me to ask most of them. I mean, we are so close to being presenting a little bit to our clerk and our mayor. I just wanted to comment and then a couple of questions, but comment. I just sort of hearing you talk about electrics and St Neots. I think that's it's one thing I'm really looking forward to sort of getting involved in a little bit closer to the time, because it's been a massive issue in Ramsey, the ownership of electrics and and there's sort of various things in the street that questionably safe and so on, but so that's music to my ears anyway to start with. So I'll just keep it down to two questions really, and that's we're going to the planning authority 2.3. Now, obviously I'd expect that to go to obviously HDC's planning committee, but have we made any inroads, pardon the pun, to county, because obviously there'll obviously be a change in road layout. So I don't know whether that's something that's been, how far down the line are we on that? I did refrain from saying how far down the road, but and then do you know? And I know this is a really difficult one to answer, for you to answer as well. But 2.6, obviously, sort of saying about how the where we're going and the finalising of the drawings. Do we have any idea sort of when that that final? Are we working to a specific, I won't say a date, but at least mid-April, is it end of April? Just for those, so I'm sure there's hundreds of people in Ramsey watching tonight to see where this is going. So, just to give a rough idea to everybody, that'd be perfect. Thanks.
So firstly, in terms of involvement, I mean, enormous thanks for the offer, and obviously Councillor Corney's active involvement, assisting us in liaison with the town council throughout the Ramsey element of the project. We're really grateful for that. Absolutely happy to engage ever more, and please minute that offer, because we'd love to hold you to it. But no, in seriousness, that's extremely helpful. Your sort of local knowledge will be invaluable, as we've obviously had with respect to St Neots work as well. So 2.3 refers to pre-application discussions, so it doesn't involve the Development Management Committee, which I know some members, including myself, are on. So that's pre-application advice from HDC planners who liaise with consultees in the normal way, albeit not formally as part of pre-app advice. In terms of engagement with county and further input on that, Pam is reaching to input.
Just to say, Councillor Corney, that we've got a meeting with the planners on the 11th of March. So the pre-app application went in February. They've obviously had some time to consider that, and we've got our first sort of pre-app meeting with them on the 11th of March. In relation to the county council, obviously we've worked very heavily. We've worked very heavily with them in St Neots as sort of project managers on the scheme for us, and we've kept them on board in relation to the work that we've done thus far in Ramsey, so that as the Highways Authority, we've felt that actually having them on board at the beginning of a project actually helps inform how that project gets delivered, and we don't have any issues raised at stages that we wouldn't have foreseen because we haven't had the Highways Authority input. So that would be comparable.
Thank you. And in terms of the final part of Councillor Corney's question, so the off-street parking options, as he'll appreciate, I think we're not in a position to commit to particular timescales tonight, but safe to say in general terms, we're looking to be able to make decisions on this aligned with final decisions around the Great White Works, so that at the point that we're identifying exactly what's proposed, we're able to explain that holistically to residents, which I hope is helpful in spirit. If not as specific as you would wish in terms of timings, very happy to follow up offline around finessing that if that's useful.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So I was happily talk about Market Towns programme for longer than I'm sure anyone else in the room. I appreciate this is not a ward council briefing, which actually we had going for a while, and there seemed to have been a pause, and I wonder whether it would be worth having a discussion with board members, whether to pick that up, to go through some of the finer details. Also, this is not a wash-up meeting, so I'm just trying to go through my notes and figure out what would be the most pertinent things to share, and by all means, please cut me down when you've had enough of me. I hopefully won't get to that point. I just first of all want to say Market Square is looking really good to my eyes. I've heard lots of other people saying similar things. I think some of the visualizations perhaps didn't really celebrate the quality of the finish that's transpiring as it's the finished version is becoming visible. I think it brings significant benefit to the town. It's great to see 6 to 7 Market Square in Huntingdon being purchased. That sounds like a significant piece of work that has come to a really positive outcome. The Falcon, again, I think is a real testament to a recognition from the start the amount of work that, not just in terms of process of designing something, but that stakeholder engagement in this case with the owner of the building. I think that appears to have paid dividends, and I've thanks to everyone involved in that process. It's been great. Similarly, private centre lease. Obviously, there's a conflict of interest there. I won't say much more other than I'm really pleased that that's got to a point that both councils are in agreement. I'm slightly jealous of Councillor Jennings mentioning my favourite typo for a long time about St Neot. I had a joke planned about like a blue plaque that we could say St Neot contributed to the design of the building or something like that, but it's gone now. So a few questions. So I'm keen to know, and apologies if this has been covered previously, but who will manage the shop in the box units and what that looks like? Shall I just do it one by one? We'll sort of rattle through a few questions if that's all right.
So just on your preamble, I feel like there was something I was going to say, but I wrote an artistic impression. It may come back to me. But in terms of the shop in a box, I think Pam was going to come in.
Current discussions have been with the Ramsey Town Council, and they have expressed an interest in managing that. So that would be part of that ongoing conversation as we sort of progress with the project.
Great, thank you. And so I guess I can probably slightly directing it more to one of my colleagues on the panel, but in terms of that conversation, I know there's difference between officers in a town council and the members, and whether the members are involved in that as well. Maybe it's a conversation we can have after the meeting. I'm not quite sure how best to tackle that. Well, if you want to respond, obviously that would be great. On the digital screens, I noticed there's 3 years funding for ongoing maintenance or running costs, and I recall from a while ago there was some funds set aside for decommissioning if that was the decision of the organisations running those screens. So sort of two parts to this question. What will be the costs to those parties if they choose to continue? And with a bit of maths, how much more funding, if they choose to continue? Obviously, there'll be a bit of unspent money, which hopefully can buy them an extra year, 3 years, 5 years. I'm just interested to know what that looks like. And the actual ongoing cost for 2 screens. I haven't heard, as in my role as town councillor, so interested to know what that's going to look like.
on the latter point, I don't have those figures to hand, but I can obviously obtain those. As part of the project from day one, we were keen to have like an exit strategy because we didn't want to basically impact revenue budgets of the town councils or whoever the organisations were that acquired the management of the screens. So at the end of the 3 years, a decision can be taken. You're quite correct. There's funding put aside to sort of decommission those if they're no longer required. But if they are, then the people that are currently managing them will have the opportunity to continue with that. But I will come back to you on the actual costs of those individual screens, because obviously there are the utility and insurance costs that I don't have to hand at the moment.
Sorry, Pam, can I just, obviously where St Ives has those screens, just to clarify the issue on the screens. I know that there was the 3-year funding, and presumably then it would be picked up by the town councils. Would they then take on the liabilities of the maintenance thereafter and negotiate separately with the provider, or decommission or not, or would that still rest with HDC?
So we're passing management of the screens over to the partners that we're working with. But as Pam said, a core objective, not least informed and encouraged by this panel in its form at the time, was that we not be adding liabilities, so there'd be understanding of the costs of the obligations and a way out. No, absolutely. If the towns decided that, for example, Chair, your town council in St Ives decided that it wished to maintain the screens longer term, it would be needing to make a decision with whatever responsibilities, whatever package might be offered at that point by the provider as well, because as Pam says, there are some costings we can provide now, but it may be quotes, maybe there may be other options available 3 years hence for maintenance. There might be options of an all-in package, doing things separately as well, depending on what risk appetite the council had. So, there will be further decisions to take further down the line, but only once you've been able to make a decision: are these useful? Are they not? And it may be they're useful, but they may reach a natural end of their lives as well.
Thank you, Chair. So page 126 of the report says the Falcon will not commence immediately, so the works won't commence immediately. I couldn't see a reason why in the report. I wonder if you can shed any further light on what residents can expect.
So works don't commence immediately, not least because there are elements of the planning process still being finalised. So it's not a realistic expectation that there'll be work tomorrow. I think we're going to touch on greater details around kind of timing and the basis for our confidence in that in part 2. So if you'll forgive me being cautious, I'd be grateful to leave that there. So residents will see stuff happen, if I can put it like that, but it won't be it won't be tomorrow or next week.
Thanks. Yes, the penny's just dropped. Thank you. So I've got 2 more points, if that's okay. One of which is, so page 129, the communication strategy that's referenced. I don't recall having seen it in my role as a cabinet member previously, and I don't think it's been circulated with ward members. Ideally, I would love I think councillors are at their best when they understand the relationship between the council and local residents. So I think that document has a real value to those ward members and any other interested party. So I'd be keen, whether it's the whole strategy or at least kind of some sense of what's happening when and what the messaging will be. Because at the moment, what's tended to happen over the last 2 years, when it goes right, people don't notice. When it goes wrong, people notice quite a lot, and including members. And so I think to kind of have a sense to reassure members that we know this is coming, this is what messaging is going to be, or whatever it might be. I think that's something that we can learn from and perhaps do better, even, within the lifetime of this project. So yeah, welcome your comments on that, please.
Thank you. So, a communication strategy is inherently iterative. It's not a sort of fixed document at a particular point in time. We absolutely have shared elements of that with ward members at key points early when there was particular wishes or concerns at earlier points in the scheme around stages in the construction works. I think the earlier reference, which it has now come back to me, I was going to come in on a little earlier, Councillor Pitt, to ward member briefings. I think is to say, absolutely, we ran those when they felt helpful. We took it from lower attendances that they'd ceased to be as helpful as more information was priced in. People were clearer what was happening. We're very happy indeed to reinstate that on whatever basis members would find useful, and to engage in a conversation around absolutely communications support, so you're aware of what we're doing, what we're communicating. So no issue at all with the thrust of the proposal there. I think we might follow up on specifics, if we may.
Thank you. Councillor, one more.
Thank you. So it's a bit more of a grumble, this one, but so the Priory Centre co-funding from the Town Council, I'm really happy that that's gone ahead and the project can be delivered, very closely to what was originally conceived quite a few years ago. In terms of the risks as set out in the report, I don't see that mentioned. So when the report was published, the Town Council hadn't confirmed that funding. And I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm sure there would have been a substantial impact if the Town Council had, in its wisdom, decided to provide no funding. And I think there's been reassurances for quite a number of months that the Town Council had that, obviously it had that choice, that is clearly true, but that the project there would be mitigations in place to ensure that if the Town Council decided not to fund, there would still be a scheme that could progress, making best use of the available funding. I think what seemed to have happened is actually that sort of contingency plan fell by the wayside as the timings got tighter and tighter, and actually the prospect of going back to planning, for example, would have been hugely disruptive and as a result very expensive to the project, and it could have jeopardized the entire project. I'm nervous that doesn't appear in this report when actually it was a live question when this was published. And so I guess I can't grumble too much about the reality of the way things have panned out, because not everything goes as smoothly as we would like on any project, let alone one of this scale. But just to kind of flag up that would be something I'd expect to see in both the resource risk and the reputation risk.
Thank you. So the paper at time of writing per 6.5, there'd been endorsement of the financial contribution unanimously by the town's Finance and Governance Committee, and we were outstanding the decision by the town full council. I mean, there's a question of where one draws the line in terms of which risks we identify and highlight at different points. I mean, absolutely, there's been no secret about the fact that should the town council decide not to, should it have decided not to contribute money, that would be lowering the scope of the works considerably. Obviously, that was we have ensured that we had contingencies around that scenario through the work to identify different value engineering options, through the fact that the planning application was deliberately maximalist on the grounds that it's much easier to pull things out in liaison with planning than to sort of add stuff in that you didn't think of to begin with. Absolutely, it would have required further stages if there'd been a shock decision by the town council last week to not put a penny in as opposed to putting 1.95 million in. So absolutely, that would have impacted in terms of timescale. In terms of if not our budgets, then certainly the level of spend. It would have impacted inevitably on optics and reputation as well. I think the judgment call we made at the point we published the paper is that the likelihood of that felt reasonably low, and it didn't need specifically signposting, but very happy to take that comment and pick up with the team around identification of low low risk, high impact, or what do I mean? Low likelihood, high impact risks. I mean, for avoidance of doubt, there's no suggestion that the risk section in this report is comprehensive. There are detailed risk registers underpinning all sorts of aspects of the work, and those are regularly monitored as part of the governance arrangements that I referenced earlier. So hopefully that's reassuring in terms of the sort of broader point. But certainly apologies if anything read as preempting a decision that was formally speaking outstanding.
Thank you for that explanation. I mean, it does strike me that a lot of the issues that Councillor Pitt has brought up would be part of a lessons learned in terms of identification of the risks and allocation of your risks. So obviously that would be part of the lessons learned report and the work that would actually follow on from that. Now, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. I mean, the delay really was as much to do with the or more to do with the non-agreement of the lease at the time, because without that lease in place, the town council wouldn't know what it was contributing to. I think there is another risk that's not in here, because I know that we've got various contingencies and what have you in there, but the town council has agreed to put in this money, and it's also agreed there's a number of things such as the kitchen fit out and other bits and pieces that have been taken out of that will be separately funded by the town council. Is
there a question? I mean,
well, that's a further $500,000, and the question really is that St Neots, as a town council, now has allocated its SIL reserves. So should there be further costs, then it hasn't got the capacity to cover any additional costs, and I believe that should be in there as a risk.
I think actually the whole issue of risk mitigation and where we are would certainly something that would follow on from general project management and the wash-up. And I think you make a good point. Are there any?
So if I may just on a couple of bits, absolutely. The £1.95 million referenced in 6.5 is a contribution to the construction costs. As the tenant or as the leaseholder of the building, the town council is then going to be fitting out its building, and further monies have been earmarked, as Councillor Chapman alludes to, which is for them to decide and confirm. So absolutely, that's not the sum total. I suppose just in terms of the budget risk point, I'd frame it the other way around. Our starting point is not to assume for any of these projects that there might be a town council happy to sort of chip in more money to bail us out of a difficulty. The financial management, budget risk management is not assuming that. It's assuming the opposite. It's assuming the money is only as set out here. So I suppose we're not denying the negative currently about the lack of that, but absolutely you're referencing that there isn't an obvious option of inviting the town council to contribute more money. So I can reassure you we are well aware of that. If that needs to be set out more formally somewhere, we can look at it. Just in terms of the sequencing, I suppose, just for completeness, I'd say this is a town council decision about contributing local SIL money, which is money that the town holds on behalf of its residents to invest in community infrastructure, of which this is a core piece. The lease discussion was with the town as an entity, so those were, of course, separate decisions. Local SIL money doesn't exist as a sort of bargaining chip in terms of lease negotiations for a town, and it wasn't used as such. Obviously, the town saw a linkage, understandably, and was keen to know what was happening with the lease prior to confirming the investment, and that's their prerogative, and I don't criticise that. But so that's just to explain to the panel the sort of the association, but not actual linkage there. If that's helpful.
I think that's helpful. Obviously, these discussions are ongoing because the project's not completed yet. Are there any other questions, Councillor Pickering?
Just what I think will be a very quick question on the shopfront projects. I noticed there are 2 abandoned shopfront projects. Can you say any more about those? Did we pull the plug? Did the shops withdraw? And did that occur before the grant money was paid, or did any money change hands, or was the grant recovered?
So, abandoned project refers to projects that applied, were offered money, and have then chosen not to proceed for whatever reason. We don't pay money until there's completion at the end of the stage. So there's certainly no loss of grant money on those. Unless Pam has at the top of her head, I don't have information on them. Any details there, and I'm not sure we'd necessarily share it in this public forum, given this is referring to individual businesses. But again, that's the short answer.
Okay. Are we finished on this part of the paper before we move to the second part of the paper? Are there any further questions? Right. Okay. The next part of the paper was the exclusion of the press and public, and that's in order to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting because the business to be transacted contains exempt information relating to financial and business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding the information.
Chair, may I just make an observation ready for the next discussion? We're offline now, aren't we, Chris? Oops. So I'm really conscious that there's lots of you that are double hatters.